Welcome to the Leading Together podcast. I'm Sean Lee, joined as always by my co-host, Joe Owig. Joe, I think we're going to do a check-in question today. I'm not just going to ask you how you're doing. What was that? Yeah, I came prepared with an actual question. So what's a highlight of your week so far?
Ooh, good one. Highlight of the week. I'm gonna go back. Does the weekend count? Last weekend?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
absolutely.
go back there. That's where my brain went. And it's because my 3-year-old, almost 4-year-old, just started a little soccer uh practice is a stretch, a soccer activity on Saturdays.
Uh,
And she's one that does not always comply in those types of settings, and she's a lovely little human. But she did so great. She was like, she was
you describing your daughter as a lovely little human, just it's funny to me.
yeah. Well, she is. I mean, she's amazing, and she just had such a good time, and um, followed all the directions, and was being asked to uh, demonstrate something, which was really funny. So it was, yeah, it really filled us up, and we've been um, just talking about it all week. So it's been a small little fun thing to talk to her about throughout the week. So
That's
yeah,
cool.
how about you?
That's awesome. Well, I feel like this is such a lame answer because it's like it's a sports fan answer. It wasn't really my life, but I'm a big Austin FC fan, which Joe knows, and I'll try not to bore our listeners to death with mentioning this too often, um, but they had a big win this past week. They are in the final of the Open Cup, which is a soccer tournament. It's been around for more than 100 years, and the final is going to be here in Austin. And actually, I got tickets yesterday for my wife and I. Um, and we're gonna be there. It's gonna be exciting. So super excited. And they won in the final seconds of extra time. So it's just really dramatic win. And it was a young guy who plays on the second team who technically was on both teams, but just a really cool moment for him. So it was great.
Yeah, I saw that highlight. That was really cool. Nice. It'll be fun
It was
to.
great.
Good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, I think tomorrow. What's
Oh,
tomorrow?
I thought you said the game was tomorrow.
Oh no. The game's in a couple weeks.
Oh, got it.
All right. Yeah. Sorry.
Good luck
The
in a couple weeks.
Yeah, games and the championships in a couple weeks. So I didn't know if there was something else I needed luck for. That's why I was asking you. I'll always take luck. So
The
thanks for
bear
that.
the Bears always need luck. So good luck to your Bears.
That's true. The Bears always need luck. All right. Well, let's take us out of our sports excitement here. We are super excited about today's episode because we're going to unpack some leadership lessons from an episode of the show The Bear, which is on Hulu if you haven't heard of it. And we're going to unpack an episode called Forks, which is in season 2. Joe and I we've talked about this episode many different times. We love it because it's such an amazing picture of a personal transformation, and it's with just a really incredible character. So if you've gotten to know the show, this is all about Cousin Richie, who's just such an interesting character in his own right. But up until this moment, he's been so pessimistic, so grumpy, always complaining. Um, like the least hopeful people. Hope is not and hopeful are not adjectives you would use to describe Cousin Richie. And up until this moment, that's how he's shown up, right? And he gets this opportunity by his cousin, Carmi, who's the lead character in the show, who sends him to train or stage in a restaurant, a world-class restaurant, to just to help him be better prepared for the new restaurant that they're opening, right? So they're transforming their restaurant. He wants him to get this training to show up and just be better prepared and show up with excellence there. So he sends him there to this world-class restaurant. He shows up until the very moment he's walking in the door, he's cussing out his cousin underneath his breath, right?
Yeah.
Just thinking like he sent him to purgatory. He sent him there to as punishmental. Doesn't believe that he's actually there to learn anything, but he's just got me out of his hair because he finds me frustrating and annoying to work with, right? So he's just frustrated all the way to the moment he walks in the door of this place. But then something dramatically shifts, right? So he has this week at this place that is so different than anything he has ever experienced. This is a restaurant that's won the awards as the top restaurant in the world. He's immersed in this environment. And after just a few days, like 3 days, he begins to change. He's energized. He starts taking it seriously. And you begin to see him develop a real sense of purpose that even transcends his work and begins to move outside of his work. So we're gonna unpack how that happened and like what were some of the characteristics of that team that led that transformation to take place for Richie. So why don't we look at our kind of our first key takeaway here, Joe, is that excellence is only sustainable when it's anchored in purpose. And Mailer's a little bit more framing. This is the most recognized and accomplished restaurant in the world that he's
Mhm.
at. Incredibly high, could not have a higher bar for excellence,
Yeah.
right? But the point we want to make here is that excellence is only sustainable when it's anchored in purpose.
Sean, do you wanna kick us off with what do we mean by that?
Yeah, well, a little bit more context on this episode. It's called Forks because what they asked Richie to do initially is to just one by one wipe all the smudges and marks off of the fork so that every single fork looks perfect. And that's just one little example of the bar of excellence and expectation that exists in this restaurant. Like everything is like that. Every single detail has to be absolutely perfect. Um, for the experience that they are trying to create for their customers. And I think when you see this initially, if you don't know what the underlying purpose is, I think most people would see an exercise like wiping forks, the smudges off forks one by one, as monotonous and exhausting and life draining. And like certainly not like I'm not realizing my potential in life here, right? Like when I'm sitting here wiping just the smudges off of forks. But what we find out is that the reason the 200 employees that are playing some role in creating the world's best restaurant are so willing to do that is that they have made this really deep connection to the why. And we hear like through different employees that Richie interacts with what those stories are, right? For some of them, it's a sense of um, how much serving others means to them. For there's a little sneak peek when they're going through the guest list of who's going to be there, and they talk about how it's been a lifelong dream for a teacher to eat at a 3-star restaurant, right? And so they say we're going to blow their mind today, right? They're not going to pay, and they bring all the extra stuff out. So there's just all these little moments where everybody has this deep sense of purpose that drives them, right? And we I think that is what makes the incredibly high bar of excellence feel like we can show up and do that over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you were watching this episode and you weren't looking for these different pieces of purpose and you were only paying attention to the intensity of some of the employee behaviors, you would just think like, that's too much, right? Or like, that's
Yeah,
unsustainable. At one point,
right.
Richie shares with the one leader, I don't know what her role was, but um, you know, "You guys are crazy, like, how do you keep this up?"
Right.
And she says
Yeah.
something like, because you get a chance to make somebody's night every night," but she immediately, like, just checks him on, like, "Because I have a serious, sense of purpose in this work, that's what allows me to be this intense about how we bring food out to people."
Yeah,
And
totally.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so great. And what's interesting about even that moment you just described is like right before she says that, she's like she kind of like, "Hey, can you get away from me for 1 minute?"
Yeah.
Right? Like she's go stand in the corner or something like that, right? Just
Oh, in the corner. I
very
crack up every time during that part.
yeah, very brutally direct and but I think to your point about like dropping into an environment like that, where if you didn't like know everything, you just be like, this is not a healthy environment, right? You'd almost be like, this is very strange.
Yeah.
Someone telling me to stand in the corner. I'm gonna walk out the door,
Right.
right?
Right.
um, but it's because they've done the work to both, create this shared sense of purpose, but also like just kind of shared norms, right? And shared, like, they're so aligned in both the why, I would say, and maybe the how they go about delivering with excellence, that like it's totally like it's fine. Like to just be like, hey, can you get out of my way for a minute? And then she steps right back into the purpose, right? She steps right back in, and I'm doing this because I get a chance to make someone's night every night.
Yeah. Well, Sean, you mentioned a word there a few different times that I think is really important, and it's the word shared. Because I think you can we've seen a lot of organizations, we've been able to work with a lot of nonprofits over the years, we've worked in those spaces before, and nonprofits lean oftentimes too much on an individual employee's, sense of purpose around the mission, right? And
Mm,
sort of sometimes we over rely on that and unfairly, bring this sort of but the work is so important, right? And that's
mm,
true, right? And that does
mhm,
allow you to bring more excellence into your work because you care about it. But when there's not shared purpose and shared sort of vision, that's one thing that you see that's very unique about the culture in this episode is that they collectively believe so deeply in the shared objective and
mm,
purpose of what they're there for that it's sort of it's through that the excellence and the drive and the intensity that they all bring is made
mm,
more sustainable, right? It's not
yeah,
such a function of each individual, and what they're bringing to the table.
yeah. That's great, Joe. It also makes me think that, if the ultimate objective for this group were to just get to become the 3-star restaurant, or to become the best restaurant in the world, where they already did that,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
what,
Yeah.
right? Like they could check. What are we even doing anymore, right? And
Yeah.
and other than maybe to make money as a profitable business,
Yeah.
but like they need something deeper, right? They need something more meaningful. They've accomplished, all the world has to offer in their industry,
Yeah.
and yet that's not, they don't need to find that. What they need is, how are we changing these folks' lives,
Yeah.
right? That's the
Yeah.
source of fuel for them. That's the source that continues to say, even though we've got all the recognition, we're going
Yeah.
to continue to make sure there are no smudges on the forks,
Yeah.
because we want people to have the best experience ever.
Yeah. I love that. So if you wanna sustain excellence, right, you need to create a collective shared sense of purpose amongst your team.
Yep.
Point
That's
1.
great. Point one. Let's go into point two here. The more clear your norms and agreements are, the easier it is to be direct, and maybe I'd say brutally direct if you're if you're watching this episode.
Yeah, intensity, right? Yeah, so we raised this because of what you see in the episode, right, around the intensity, and, a common leader reaction to something like that might be they would think I was crazy, or they would, be upset with me, or they would feel like I'm being mean, or all of these different things. And that very well may be true. But oftentimes it's because we're missing, right, this clarity around norms and agreements, right, that are also anchored in purpose, right? That each of which have a real close connection to the purpose. And so in this culture, in this environment, down to the fork, right? Down to the nth degree, they have defined how we show up. How do we work together? What are the expectations? And as a result, you can see this real healthy delivery of direct feedback, right? And again, if you watch the episode, we're not endorsing every
Yeah.
behavior. We see some
Yeah.
some fun ones that are less ideal, but it's through that clarity that a leader is able to show up and bring that directness, right, and that efficiency in helping to ensure the vision is being met, right?
Yeah.
What do you see in this
Totally.
one?
Yeah. I mean, I think it just makes me think that when you haven't taken the time as a team to clarify, some of your most important norms and how you collaborate, how you operate, that a very direct piece of feedback or instruction. It's not even really feedback sometimes, as much as just someone telling someone to do something. that feels can feel very uh, shocking, disorienting, right? Like we were to say, well, does that just does that just that's that person's preference and how they want to work? Well, I don't want to be, or what's driving that directness or that them just getting straight to the point. But once we've created some team norms that, around things like, um, how we talked in the case of this episode, like how we communicate on the floor, like, there's a norm around that. How we deliver the food, there's a norm around that. Like, how we admit when we make mistakes, there's a norm around that. Like, there's all these norms that when then someone on the team is not in alignment or agreement with what that norm is that's been created, it creates an environment where people can just be that much more direct. And we also don't know if this is true for the team, but they might even have a norm around directness, right? Like around like the fact that we value just getting right to the point and saying the thing, right? Again, to Joe's point here, um, you're going to see if you watch, we'd love for you to watch the episode, but you're going to see a few times where people are cussing each other out. We're not saying that is the model, but there are a lot of other moments that are where they're just really clear, really decisive and get to the point.
Yeah. And I think one thing that we want to point out here as well is that being direct all the time in every moment is not like some gold standard that we're suggesting teams should be striving for, but the opportunity to be direct, because of the need to be able to be direct, and not top down, right? All over, right? Up, up, down, across all the directions. And when you have clear norms and agreements anchored in some purpose, it gives you the opportunity to do that in a direct way, in an effective way. And when we don't have that, right, we oftentimes don't feel like we can be direct. We sort of, consider what we should be saying, right? What I'm not seeing what I want to see, right? But we don't have clarity here, and so I'm sort of at a loss of words for what is the feedback or the input or the thing that I want to share, right? But when those norms and agreements are clear, we just feel all the more equipped to be able to hold the standard, right? To push and encourage and challenge the standard.
Yeah. Another scene I'm reminded of in the episode is when they overhear the person that doesn't want to leave Chicago without trying deep dish pizza, and then they that and apparently it's one of their norms is listening for that stuff,
Hmm.
right? So they even have a norm established where like we're going to listen for these things so that we can make the experience that much more special. But because and I don't, you might say this is more of a principle or I don't know, this might be not quite a norm, but there, at least there's some alignment that's been established in this idea. And it's that when they figure that out, there's sort of no question that somebody is going to run around the corner and get a deep dish pizza, right? Um, versus a world where like you hadn't done that, that might have seemed like a crazy response. Like I'm not going to do that. I'm staging. I'm waiting. I'm running. Like I'm doing. You want
Yeah,
me to go do what? It's like no, no. Everyone, of course I'm going to go do that because we're here for this. Like so, it's
yeah,
also a norm that they would go do things that are I think to pull from the book, which is referenced in the episode, like unreasonable in a good
yeah,
way, right? They would
yeah.
they would offer unreasonable hospitality because that's a part of their overall foundation of how they want to show up with their customers.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're listening and you're wondering, like, how do I, what do we don't have these norms and agreements written down. Like, do I need to sit down and like write everything down right away? As we would encourage progress principle here, right?
Hmm.
Just start somewhere and start defining some of these things, right? It is an ever evolving process. That restaurant got to where it was, not because it wrote down 1,000 agreements on day one
Yeah,
and like these are
right.
all the things they learned and they grew, right? And with that sense of purpose, they got to a place where they said, "We run down the street and get pizza," right? When we hear those sorts of things, and so just one thing that we just encourage teams to do regularly is just document, right? And in places, start to put this down on paper and make this right the norm, the culture of the team.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go into our final key takeaway or key point today, Joe? And it's this, that when people have purpose at work, it can give them a sense of purpose in their whole life, right? Not just at work, but that purpose can permeate their entire life.
Yeah. Well, so you see, I mean, this is why we would encourage everyone to watch the episode because it really, no matter who you are and what your role is, it just hits home the way that Richie transforms inside of this episode. And what we don't talk about is he has this personal moment that's um, disappointing to him that happens inside the episode, right? So you see this sort of this rich, difficult news that he hears on the personal front inside of the episode, and yet because he's found so much more meaning in the workplace, he he wakes up in the morning with a different posture. He treats his home a little bit differently because of
Hmm.
what he's finding in the workplace. And
Hmm.
we talk to leaders a lot, and sometimes it can feel aspirational. The idea of sending people home from work more full, energized, ready to go home and be with their friends in meaningful ways. And yet
Hmm.
we know that it's possible. This is a
Hmm.
fictional story and it's a beautiful one. It's a great picture of what that can look like. But we've experienced this firsthand in our roles, and we've heard this feedback from others that when you have that degree of purpose, uh, you really can show up in your home life in a different way. And we just love that this episode reminds us of that.
Yeah. This is the reason I love this episode so much. I mean, it's one of I texted Joe last night as we were preparing for the pod saying like this is like one of my favorite episodes of television of all time. And it's because I I I know I'm guilty of this. I think sometimes can believe that people are not going to change. Right? Like we see them and we can just be like they're just always going to show up cynical. They're just always going to be a downer. They're never gonna bring the energy. But what you see here is you have same person. We get to see him, maybe not in this episode, but in previous over the course of the show, we get to see what he's like on two different teams. We only get the one episode. This episode forks on the other team, but we have all the other episodes up leading up to that, to how he shows up on at the bear, the beef. What's it turns into the bear? Is it called the beef before that?
The V. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The V.
Anyway, um, and he is not deriving a greater sense of purpose from his work. He might be developing a sense of identity and like what his job is, but not like it's not calling him to a higher way of showing up and having an impact around others around him until he has this experience in this other team. And you see it like in just little glimpses in this episode. You see him waking up differently in the morning where he's more energized. You see him going home and reading at night, and he was just never did that before because he's interested in growing and becoming a better version of himself.
That's right.
And I think the reason we get so excited about that is because like that is, as leaders, that is our potential.
Yeah.
I mean, we can do that for people. Like we can do for the people we work with what happened to Richie. Like we have that power every day we go to work to make an impact in that way so that someone can change who they are, and not just for the benefit of our own team. That's probably the thing you will see immediately is like to the benefit of it will benefit the team chemistry and cohesion, but it has this huge rippling effect in everybody else they interact with their family, with their friends, with their kids, with their partner, with their spouse. So
Yeah.
it's just yeah, I find this episode so hopeful
Yeah.
because of how he transforms.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing. He feels, we haven't mentioned this, but we're alluding to it, the degree of significance, right? That
Mm,
grows in him in
yeah.
this episode, right? We feel a greater sense of significance, like we matter to people, when we feel valued and seen by other people, which grows to he's starting to be noticed by this team and feel that connection.
Mm, Yes.
By the end of it, he feels like he's adding value, right? So we feel a greater sense of significance when we begin to add value. And the moment where he gets to deliver the pizza, he is he is so full of mattering, right, and
Hmm.
significance in that moment.
Hmm.
It's gonna take him through the next month, right? And
Right. Yeah.
I mean, it's everything to him in that moment. So,
Yeah.
um,
Joe, just
yeah,
to add here, I mean, I think I'm glad you're calling this moment out and the significance and mattering because he when he feels like he matters, then he adds value. And I don't. This might just be my take, but the way he shows up in that scene when he's delivering the pizza, you see his natural self come out,
yeah,
right? Like and I would say he's actually now adding to the team. Right, the team is kind of sterile, right? For their high bar of excellence, you're not getting any warmth and personality. And I would argue, like, they need a little bit of that, like, the true best version of Richie when he's like, "Manja, baby,"
yeah,
and,
yeah,
is you want a Bacardi and Diet Coke?
yeah,
I know that's a little bit out of maybe the Bacardi and Diet Coke they would
yeah,
want, but they
yeah,
get the warmth and they get,
super
like, the
warm.
real you get this picture of that, like, if he shows up with his most authentic self, he's now gonna make them better.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why when we work with teams to help them to build a higher degree of significance in their employees, right? Get those employees wanting to run to work, that the business is better as well, right? Because they get the better product, right? They got better service because he felt that degree of increased significance in that moment. So it's there's these helpful business outcomes that wind up being true as well when
Right,
we just care,
totally.
care about people, help them find their meaning, help them feel like they matter.
That's right. So many wins. I don't know if it's how many wins there are. It felt like a win-win-win-win that you just described there. Lots of winning personally for the team, for the business,
Yeah.
right? For the people in our lives outside of work. That's great. Well, why don't we wrap this one up, Joe? Maybe so. The takeaway for today is pretty simple. We'd love for you to go watch the episode that we've been talking about, season 2. The episode is called Forks, and just a simple reflection: how purposeful does your role feel? Right. So after you watch the episode, reflect on how purposeful does your role feel, and try to identify what it might take to strengthen your sense of purpose in your role and on your team. All right. Well, thanks as always for tuning in to this episode of Leading Together. If you found it valuable, be sure to like, subscribe, or leave a review. It helps more leadership teams discover these conversations. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment with your thoughts. You can also find more resources at sixlevers.co. Until next time, remember to take that one step toward becoming a more cohesive leadership team.